Hello, my name is Quay Skankey. Now, if you would indulge me for a second, I need you to reflect on something. For if you have a house, or you live in one, this will apply to you. I want you to reflect on the opportunities you are given in your life, all of them. And I want you to ask yourself, be honest, if you would have those opportunities if you didn't have a home, or you didn't live in one. Now that you're done reflecting, the obvious answer is no, you wouldn't. Unfortunately, this is the situation that many thousands and hundreds of thousands of Americans find themselves in. Which brings me to my topic of my speech today, which is homelessness and poverty and how to combat them. Specifically in two ways. But we'll get to that in a minute, because we got to talk about the problem of homelessness first and why it is a problem. I mean, that's a little obvious, but we'll continue forth. By the journalist Kay Nolan, she says that 40 million Americans live in poverty. Now, what this means is, because if you live in poverty, usually it means you're living check to check, and all homeless people qualify as living in poverty. And the unfortunate aspect about being in poverty or being homeless is the fact that if you are in poverty or you are homeless, it is not easy to get out of that. It is expensive to be homeless and in poverty. This goes to the biggest issue with homelessness as a concept. If you're homeless, you can't get a job because the conditions that are brought upon you by your homelessness status is unappealing to employers, and you will not get hired, unfortunately. And this is the problem, because living in poverty and being homeless is not something anyone should deserve to be in. You don't have all the options and freedoms that people who live in a middle-class suburban neighborhood would, or even if you're not in a neighborhood but you're just middle class. It's unfortunate, and it's incredibly difficult to get out of it, which is why homelessness is such a big problem. But how can we solve it? Well, there are two ways. The first one is a bit radical, but you need to follow along. I need to ask that you follow along and don't come to too many conclusions. It's called Housing First, and basically the idea is, let's just give homeless people a home. Now, I know that sounds crazy, and it is to an extent, but let me explain. And the article is how homelessness is housing first, the best approach to fight homelessness. The article states that the advocates for housing first say, I quote, compared to the constantly accumulating law enforcement, hospital, and other costs of letting people who are to live on the street, providing individuals who are homeless with permanent housing is surprisingly affordable. Now, this makes sense when you really think about it. Not only is being homeless expensive to homeless people, but it's expensive to your area, because homeless people are not bringing in revenue, and they are taking up vital resources such as hospitals and vital time of police officers. So in reality, we're wasting money by having homeless people exist, in a sense. And that's not to say we should kill them, obviously, but we should eliminate the problem, ideally, by giving them a home. And the reason why this is so good is because, well, ideally, if you give a homeless person a home, they will have the tools they need to get their life back together. They won't have to worry about rent. They will have all the means that they could survive and contribute to society in the ways that matter. But if that one is too radical for you, I got a better one. And you may have heard this one before, and you may actually support it. Put simply, raise the minimum wage. Right now, it's really low, and it has been this way for a decade. In an article by Barbara Montel, she says, advocates for raising minimum wage say it would help struggling low-income families, nudge down poverty, and increase in consumer demand, all with minimum loss of jobs. So it seems like a banger, right? Seems like a really good idea. And it has a lot of benefits because people, homeless people, when they do get a job, they can actually afford for their living expenses and, pay rent, which is really nice. Because right now, if you just get a job right now, it's not easy to. Most jobs don't have living wages, which is so unfortunate. Another reason why it's so good to raise the minimum wage is because, put simply, when people get more money, they spend more money, and that's good for the local economy. And when people get more money, they spend more on taxes, and the more taxes go towards needed social programs like infrastructure and social welfare, which helps homeless people get out of homelessness, thus getting them to pay more taxes, thus getting more homeless people out of homelessness, which is just this self-cycle that is just really beneficial to everyone. Win-win, everyone wins. But there are some counter-arguments to these that are worth noting. The first one is that to give homeless people a home would be a waste of taxes. But to return to that previous article I mentioned about housing first, the advocates for it say that it will save taxpayer money by preventing costly visits to the hospitals or jail, which, like I mentioned before, win-win, everyone wins. But the other counter-argument is a bit vague. Basically, some people think that if you give homeless people a house, that they will be lazy and they will not work. But the problem is that homeless people don't work now because they can't work. So you can't really combat that. The best way is to give them a home, because at least you're giving them an opportunity and a second chance to work. Right? But ultimately, I digress. In conclusion, homelessness is a self-eating cycle, and it benefits no one in the end. And we have options to fight it. We just need to take them, and you act on them. Because when people have a house above their head, they'll be having the same opportunities that we have, simply given to us by virtue of having a roof above where we sleep. So, yeah. Thank you.